He turned the car on in the garage, and my fucking horn came through the Bluetooth.
I heard Dean Blundell smokes crack. Was actually the first to smoke it with Rob Ford, I heard, too.
What's Dean got to do with it? Frankly, my dear, I don't give a Dean.
It's rated R for, restricted and for a little bit romantic.
What do we got?
What is that in the background?
What is that over there by the mic?
Is he making wallets?
What
is he doing?
What's he doing?
It looks like he's... Never mind.
What's he doing? What? Is he dead?
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Let's start right out. Hey, what happened?
Hi there, welcome. Welcome back. My name is Dean. Nice to see everybody. It's the start of the week. We have a busy show. We have a busy week today, as a matter of fact. I was just going over the schedule as James, our unofficial showrunner / co-host, was sharing it with me. We got Noam Chomsky this week. Well, he's got Noam Chomsky this week. We've got Glenn Greenwald this week. We've got Dr. Sandra Oh this week. We're going to be talking a little sex. We got
Deborah So.
Deborah So. That's what I meant. Talking a little sex.
Okay.
We got Nick Kiprios, former NHLer, Stanley Cup champion, to talk some Stanley Cup playoff hockey. It's a busy week.
Nick.
Isn't that nice? And special thank you to our partners, Blue Microphones, the official microphone of DeanBlundell.com, and our 33-strong podcast network. Every member uses everything Blue, including these Blue Yeti X mics and these MoFi headphones. So go to BlueMic.com today. Check them out. They're awesome. We wouldn't be anywhere without them, so thanks to our friends at Blue. Also, Black Rose Organics, shop.blackroseorganics.com. If you want to get yourself a medical license or port your license, 30% THC in their garlic sherbet. Plus, when you get a medical membership, half-price ounces. Super smart. Shop.blackroseorganics.com. Also, hello to Ed at Ed's Fine Imports. His Gitch luxury underwear. You can get 4 for the price of 3 with promo code GITCH3 right now for men. Boxer briefs, pouch in the front. You'll love them. Best underwear I own. Go to edsfineimports.com to order those today. And, of course, Easy Auto Financial. If you're looking for a vehicle, you can't get lending. Hard to do because your credit rating is blown thanks to the pandemic or other reasons that we just don't want to talk about. EasyAutoFinancial.ca sets you up with financing and a car and a dealer. So go check them out, EasyAutoFinancial.ca. I said it was a busy week. We're bringing everybody in today. Not only is Locke and James here, Jon Kay from the editor of Quilette. He's back. He agreed to come back. Jon Kay is back.
What's going on? Then he saw that new intro and he's like, "This is the last time, boys."
Yeah. Jon Kay's back.
Did you like Jon? I got
Jon,
talk to the agent. Yeah.
I thought about you the other day when I was at the store. We're getting ready for a puppy.
Oh, wow.
And so we were looking at all that, and of course there's 9,000 dog shampoos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wonder if I should send Jon a quick little
Arm and
note
Hammer.
on
Arm and Hammer.
Arm and Hammer. Okay.
By the way, there's no such thing as dog shampoo. There is shampoo.
Okay.
You can use it on a dog. You can use it on a human.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as I've said publicly, it's very confusing because of the way they market these things.
Yeah.
But there's the biggest complaint. So the biggest complaint in my house is
Right
actually
into the dog shampoo, by the way.
If I grab human shampoo and wash my dog with it, because my dog actually gets washed in the same bathroom as I wash. My kids, my girls and my wife complain because then for the next 2 weeks the dog smells like, I don't know, whatever Ivory Springs smells like. And I mean, to me that's just the smell of soap.
Mountain Fresh.
Every girl / woman in my household, like within 3 seconds, is like, you use the wrong kind of shampoo. And so they don't care what kind of shampoo I use, but be very careful what you use on the dog.
The pecking order is noted.
I had no idea you could use shampoo for everybody and everything. I had no idea. I just assumed that it was like I saw these face masks on Twitter today. They had these face masks, exact same face mask. One was in a blue box, one was in a pink box, one was for men, one was for women. And I'm like, oh, fuck it. Thank God they made that discernment, because, you wouldn't know if you were a guy or a girl going to get nondescript face masks. But there's duality like that everywhere. That's why I don't see you, buddy. That's why I don't begrudge the fact that you use dog shampoo. In fact, I herald it
It's Big Shampoo doesn't want you to realize that it's all the same stuff. But so you got to fight back.
Conspiracy.
You got to fight back.
How have you been, John? Great to have you back.
I've been good. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's fun. It's you guys are always a rollicking good time. So yeah, enjoying.
Rollicking, eh?
Rollicking.
Good time. We feel like
la 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 la.
Yeah. Rollickers. Well, since last time you've been here, lots happened, and we're thankful to have you back. The editor of Quilette, you're an academic and intellectual, and we loved our conversation with you last time. We've got a bunch of stuff that we wanna get to, but before we do it, how do you keep not shampoo, but how do you keep your hair that tight? How do you keep it that short in the pandemic? Because I haven't had a haircut for months now, and I'm dying for one, even though this looks actually really good.
Yeah.
Doesn't look anywhere near as good as yours. So what are you doing for haircuts?
Yeah, no, I have a sort of like calculated, like sort of well-tooled look going on. Like it's very casual, but it actually takes a long time to get that look.
Mm-hmm.
No, so as we were talking about, so my eldest daughter has given me, I think, 6 haircuts by now. And the first time it happened, she was bad at it. But it was kind of like a novelty, but no one cared because we were never leaving the house. And so no one was going to see my hair anyway.
Yeah.
Actually, that was around the time, this is true, I gave myself frosted tips because we had just seen the episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where Peralta goes to Florida. And in order to blend in as a sort of Florida white trash lowlife, he has frosted tips. And so this is like May of last year and people were doing crazy stuff. Yeah. And that's that. So then she gave me a second haircut and she actually was pretty good at it. And then it became less of a novelty and more like, well, can you take some off the side and leave some on top? Like it became more of a traditional barber experience. But she's tired of it. Although now I'm not sure, it feels weird to go back to paying money for it because I don't see any quality difference between what my daughter does and what I get.
John, Floby.
It sucks as it cuts.
It looks dangerous. So
Floby, you should give it a try. You let your daughter cut your hair with no experience.
You know what? She's
hook up the vacuum cleaner.
Hideous. I think that could be her career. She's really good at it. But it's going to feel weird to pay money for it because there's absolutely no way she's going to do it once the pandemic's over. So
and that kind of brings up a great point, which is, how many things have we over the span of this pandemic? We were talking about before we went on the air, so I want to just touch on it because I think it's a great fucking conversation. How many things have you said, you know what? I pay people for all these little things in my life. Now that we're in the pandemic and nothing's open, how can I cut the fat out of my life? And what can I do that I didn't think I was capable of doing before? For me, it's cooking and baking. I didn't know I could bake the shit out of stuff, and I can. I didn't know I could cook like Guy Fieri, but I can. And it saved me all kinds of money not eating out. You'd think a guy like me would be, eating out all the time. And but then I start thinking about, well, why don't I try and change my oil or maybe build a koi pond in the backyard?
Wow, hipster.
But you know what I mean? It's all these little things. You can make an entire journal entry by the end of this pandemic of skills that we've attained, loosely termed skills, that we wouldn't have attained if we weren't forced to shelter in place for 15 months.
I grew weed.
Wow.
I did. I grew weed. I haven't spent money on weed in since October, I guess. And I yielded 4 pounds of weed. I couldn't believe it. I was like, okay, this is good. I followed all the instructions. And then I started to take it really seriously.
Clearly following the rules and regulations set upon us by the government of Canada on our own grow ops. But that's
I totally did. I obeyed all the rules because they couldn't find the other 2 plants. But but they're gone now, so fuck it. But I would go out there. I would go out there and trim it with these little scissors, and I'd get all serious about it. And I hung it in my boiler room and told the kids that if they're gonna go in there to just dodge the weed. So it was good. They did
dodge the weed.
I probably saved $4,000 or something like that.
Have you gone under lights, James?
No, I grew it outside, man.
It's all outdoor. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for
Yeah,
you.
little things like growing
Little things
400 pounds of weed.
growing,
Four
growing
pounds.
weed.
4 pounds is a lot.
I was talking
though.
about
Like,
I was talking about changing your oil. I wasn't necessarily talking about
you're
growing.
talking about saving money and things that you do that you
Yeah,
never
it's
did
true.
before. That's what I did. I
That
grew
is
weed.
true.
I have an aversion to cars, so I don't even. John was
Don't
saying
touch it.
he's doing his own, changing his own tires, and I don't do any of that.
No, that was a big step for me. Like,
Yeah.
to put the car up on the jack, because I just assumed that as soon as the car was like a centimeter off the ground, something terrible would happen and it would like fall and explode. And I mean, just like the whole
your
idea of lifting like 1.5 tons of metal. I mean, it is frightening.
Yeah.
And I watched a lot of YouTube videos. But then when you do the math, because we have a couple of cars in our household, 2 tire changes a year times 2 cars times. I mean, I like we were saying, I think even when the pandemic's over, I'll probably do it for the next, I don't know, until I'm going to say 10, 15, 20 years. You're talking thousands of dollars. But then the flip side of it, which, you know, like in my dark imagination, like I like the guy at the dealer who changes my tires.
Yeah.
And that guy, I mean, he feeds his family based on him doing this. So on one hand, it's like, oh, this is so cool. I can change my tires and save all this money. My neighbors see me and they, you know, it somewhat reduces the stereotype I have in the neighborhood as like this sort of, you know, annoying media pencil neck. And like, that's cool. But then I also feel guilty because this guy, you know, statistically, there are mechanics who just, they're going to have to find another line of work. They're going to have to deliver for Uber or something. And this is true of everything. All these things we're doing ourselves, we're increasingly, like in my case, I order more stuff from Amazon. Like the jack that I use to lift my car, I order from Amazon. So increasingly, we're just going to become these people ordering stuff from Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And society is going to be like more jobs, people in warehouses in Amazon and other people at home ordering stuff on Amazon, and like less interaction with sort of the kind of people who do day-to-day jobs. And that's, it's nice to be self-sufficient, but it's also somewhat depressing.
My daughter said to me the other day, she said, because I asked her to take mom's car to the garage. We go to a local guy, Hearst Automotive, Joe and Bob. And I said, take the car down.
Sorry, Locke, before you continue your story, what were their blood types and middle names?
I'll get to that.
Thank you.
I'll do a little bit of investigative reporting. I've been learning that from James. So anyway, Bob and Joe do all the work on our cars. And
oh shit, you're fucked.
Let's take the car down and get mom's oil changed. And it was going to be one of those things where she had to be there at a certain time as an appointment. She's like, why don't you just let me take it to like a Jiffy Lube? And I'm like, because I like those guys and I want to help them out. I want to give them the $100. I wanted them to have it instead of the other guy, right? You know that. So I totally see where you're coming from, John. I had that moment this week, that pang that I got to help these guys out. Yep. Yeah.
Fortunately, I don't feel the same way you do, so I'm good.
Or James, what about your weed dealer? Like, I mean, do you?
Yeah.
You have any,
you know, he called me.
or whatever his name is. Like this.
He called
Carl.
He called me.
Is Carl mad at you?
Well, I'm not going to say his name, but he did call me in
Was he hurt?
November. He called me in November and he was like, hey, I haven't heard from you for a while. And I told him, I'm like, I grew weed. And
did you lie like everybody else would do? Oh, I quit. I don't do it anymore.
No, I told him I grew weed and I wouldn't require his services anymore. Like
that's awkward
that's
though.
it. No, it's not, because his weed, his weed wasn't as good as I'd like anyways. And
no, but if I were you, I would have kept buying
weed
it
turned out
and
to be
like
the
throwing it out because I'd be so nervous that I hate social conflict. So I would have bought it and thrown it out.
No, he did trade him some of my.
He throws
I'm
weed
not
out.
gonna throw it.
You know, I just have to say something, John. For someone who hates social conflict, you certainly get after it on Twitter.
No. Okay, so this is a misconception, not only about me, but people maybe like me.
Yeah.
Is that I like to mix it up at arm's length about like ideological stuff. But as anybody who knows me in my personal life, I'm like my family members make fun of me because I will do stuff like that. I mean, I haven't done it with weed, but
you should.
Like, so
I'll send you
an
some.
example.
You can do it with weed.
I put on Facebook, and actually James and I follow each other on Facebook, and I had these 2 travel coffee mugs that I didn't want anymore. And I said, hey, who wants these travel mugs? And this guy like on the other side of the city, who I haven't seen in 20 years, said, yeah, I'll take them. And I said, okay, I'll bring them over. And then my family is like, what are you doing? And it's like, you're going 20 miles to bring this guy coffee mugs? And it's like, yeah, but I do stuff like this because I don't want to say to the guy, actually, I changed my mind. I don't want to spend an hour and a half in the car to bring you 2 $5 coffee mugs. Like that to me, I don't want to do. Yeah. So I just get in the car and I do it. And I do stuff like that all the time. So it's kind of the opposite of my online persona. Like totally.
Yeah. You know, because you tweeted a couple of things, and I'll just bring these up, and then we'll get to Bill C10. This one made me laugh. It was something that you retweeted. The next time someone complains that Twitter is full of culture warriors spouting nonsense, just show them this exchange to prove it can actually be an effective forum for amplifying progressive values and educating the masses. You took their names out. Hi, I'm a lesbian, and I fucking love dick. Centering lesbianism around pussy is so fucking othering to trans and non-binary lesbians. Jesus fucking Christ. Then the next one, lesbian says, I love dick. I just don't like dick when it's attached to a cis man, but girl dick or non-binary dick is totally fine, and I don't think that makes me a lesbian. And I was reading that, I'm like, hey, I think that was very off-brand for you, so I loved it. Loved everything.
If it was that off-brand,
but it was like, well, I don't think it was either when you go through. But like the Jon Kay that I know, I'm like, oh, he's looking for trouble today. I like this guy.
Well,
do you know that account? That account, Titiana McGrath. Dean, you might not be familiar with her, but go ahead, John. Yeah.
No, but you know, it's actually, this is an interesting example. So yeah, Titania McGrath is a parody account. It's this person who presents as ultra woke and tweets stuff like that. Because if you look at the tweet, it's like very earnest and but the real person behind that is actually named Andrew Doyle, and Andrew Doyle is an Oxford trained. I think it's like Renaissance studies or something like that, or the history of poetry, like something very highfalutin. And he actually just came out with a book, which he didn't write it in the character of Titania McGrath. He wrote under his own name. It's a defense of free speech. I interviewed him on the podcast a couple of months ago, and I actually take inspiration from him. He's this like very mild-mannered guy. He happens to be gay, but like when I was talking to him, in his personal demeanor, in the way he expresses himself, I find him very much like me in that, you know, he's not looking for a fight interpersonally. And the way he writes when he's not in his Titania McGrath character is very matter of fact. And I think it is possible, and not just possible, but common, that a lot of these people who we know online as firebrands, I'll give you an example, you know, Terry Corcoran. So Terry Corcoran, National Post columnist, he's been around for a long time. He writes these very often sardonic, often scathing, conservative articles in the Financial Post. And when you meet him, people probably think, oh, he's going to bite your head off. He's like the nicest guy in the world. He lives downtown. You know, he actually lives like kind of a very progressive, low carbon lifestyle. Rex Murphy, the nicest guy in the world. And often, and the opposite of that is like you meet a lot of these social justice warriors who are all mother's milk and kindness online, and they're just like complete sociopaths in real life. And so often it's like, it's not always like there's no hard and fast rule, but often the character a person has in real life is like the inverse of what they exhibit online.
No hard and fast rule. You seem to be closing in on one.
Well, I'm just giving you examples. No, but I do know people who are like, you know.
Yeah, you're not wrong, by the way. Just throwing it out there. You're nailing it. Continue.
Yeah. No, there's people who are nice online and nice in real life. And I think we all have our favorite examples of people who are nasty in both capacities. But I think, I mean, James, I think you could probably, I'm guessing you agree with this, that there are people who defy expectations when you meet them in real life.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest example that I can think of just in my personal life that I happen to know or used to know was Christy Blatchford.
Yes.
There was a lot of people that thought that she was like, she must just be this like she-devil in real life and everything. She couldn't be more selfless and generous with her time. And I mean, she still had a trucker mouth, but she wasn't a bad person at all. Like she wasn't, you know, she had a trucker mouth, and she would be the first to say that, time. Right? But
George Jonas was like that. George Jonas was the nicest guy in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a go ahead.
No, I was going to say it kind of bleeds into, you know, an article that you wrote. a couple of weeks ago for the National Post, which I don't know what to make of it. I know you like Rex, and I like Rex too. Well, I like what he writes because I like how he gets after people, and he knows what he's doing, just like you did with this article entitled, quote, "Oh, look, now the Ravines are racist too."
The old
as
look
soon as
part.
oh, look, everyone, now the Ravines are
I wrote
racist
that
too.
headline too, by the way. I sometimes they allow me to write my own headlines, and I wrote that.
Yeah. one. You nailed it. And when you read the headline, it was funny because I watched people. You started to trend as soon as that article came out. I think at one point you were number one in Canada, and I'm like, what is in this article that is so fucking bad? People were coming after you, calling you names, saying, "Oh, look, Jon Kay, there he is again, making fun of black people." And I'm like, no, he's not. I don't think he is. It's not the kind of person that I know and we've talked to. And so when you read the article, you get like a clue as far as what you were trying to do, where you were basically saying, I go through these ravines. I play frisbee golf or disc golf back there. I've walked them all the time, full of all kinds of people, all manner of life. And you were saying that you love going back there. You love the routine. It's full of all kinds of people, and the reason why you wrote it is, and I want to read this to you. This is part of your article. So, how do journalists resolve this conflict between reality and ideology? Behold the Globe and Mail's recent double byline feature arguing non-white people face barriers when they try to access Toronto's ravine system. By way of evidence, the two reporters offer the account of a black woman who said she worried that a white person might see her near the ravine and call the police. The woman is an experienced hiker, yet offered no evidence she'd actually witnessed anything close to this kind of treatment. Just the opposite. The only interactions she detailed to the Globe were encounters in which perfectly polite park goers tried to help her on the mistaken possibility she might need directions. You then go on to say, as I read the article, I wondered how two Globe and Mail journalists, one of them being an urban affairs reporter no less, could visit Toronto's ravine system and come away with this kind of narrative. But then I reread the thing and I realized that my premise had been faulty. Nothing in the text suggests either journalist, both of them as white as can be, by the way, had actually visited the ravine as part of their reporting, let alone interviewed anybody.
Yeah. Oh, no, that was the most shocking part of the article is like you kind of read it and you assume, well, these are two Toronto-based journalists. As I wrote, the Globe and Mail offices, which presumably they went to sometime before the pandemic, is located like a couple of 100 yards from like one of the access points to the ravine system. So, eventually after they, are quoting blogs and quoting some PhD student at the University of Toronto who studies racistology in parks or whatever, that like eventually we're going to get to a point where these intrepid reporters, or at least one of them, like actually dares to set foot in the ravine system and report and maybe even interview someone there, in a socially distanced way. The thing went on, I think it was 22 or 23 I counted at one point. They never actually went to the ravine. Like, and they're not reporting on, on some glacier in Greenland or something. Like, they're reporting on something that is, it's the backbone of Toronto's park system. They are purporting to write an article about the social climate. It would have taken them 20 minutes to actually go and interview a human being, and they didn't. They had their conclusion. They had some blogger who kind of like had something that supported what they said, and they wrote their article. I couldn't believe. I mean, forget the authors who looked, based on their photos, looked like, they're very young. What about their editors? I mean, did an editor not say to them, if you're going to call the Toronto ravine system racist, like maybe visit it? Go. So I go to the ravine system every day. I bike there. I take my dog there. I play frisbee golf. There are many times that you'll go on whole stretches of it before, like I'm the only white guy. Like, I don't know what part of the ravine system these people are talking about. Even places which aren't even technically on the ravine. I think, well, maybe they are. Like Brickworks is fairly waspy because Brickworks is near Rosedale. But the last couple of years, you go there, whites are. I was there today. I because of the stupid Globe article, I'm actually like, this is what I hate. It turned me into like one of these racial bean counters where like, well, today I saw 17 white people and 34. Like, what the fuck? Like, why am I doing this? It's because of the stupid. They made me do it. And then you could go to Sunnybrook Park, which is it's near Lawrence Park. Like, it's near some pretty nice areas. So yeah, I mean that can be pretty white. But even there, it's like it's Toronto. You see everybody. You see hijabs. You see immigrant families. You see blacks, whites, and if these reporters had actually gone there in 20 minutes, they would have looked at each other and said, "What are we doing? Like, how can we write this article and maintain any semblance of self-respect?"
Are you sure they would have? I think they probably would have written it anyway.
They would have, because, well, I guess I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. But if they had actually gone there, I think something inside them would say, like, this, we can't do this. Like, we're just, but by not going there, they were able to kind of report on this fantasy universe where the ravine is like some kind of, daunting place for anybody who's not white, which is ridiculous. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even make any sense, just from like a perspective of, okay, guys, we're gonna write about racial justice. What do you got? And it's like they could choose anything. The subway system, just write about that. That's going to be racist somehow. Why? Because Sherburne Station exists, or something.
I think. Well, but I think that's the genesis of it. Is that so? This article was part of a larger project. The Globe. The Globe did I think it was like a 4-part series on the ravine system, and you can.
By the way, just in case you were wondering, I'm not a big reader on ravine systems. Like, nothing jumps out at me when I see a newspaper article. It's like, let's talk about Toronto's ravine system.
Look,
I'm like, how about fucking anything else?
Look, so may I say, by the way, that the Toronto ravine system is thought to be the largest urban ravine system in the world.
11,000 square feet or hectares. 11,000 hectares.
11,000 hectares.
That is quite big.
I have no idea.
So it's pretty big. So I mean, it's the story. It's a big story, and a lot of people look. It's a legit story. A 4-part series is a little much, but you can just tell that the reason this article came into existence was that somebody in a Globe and Mail editorial meeting said, well, if we're going to do a multi-part series, of course we have to have the part where we talk about how racist it is. And I think a lot of this stuff is just assumed, like, well, if you're doing and I saw this, I was an editor a couple of years ago at a magazine. It was like, if you're doing a 5-part series on X, you have at least one piece on the racistness of X, and another piece about how Indigenous people were always doing X, and we only think that we invented X. And then there's a piece about the unbearable maleness of X. And then, like, you have 2 other pieces that you can write what you want. And that's kind of become the formula for these multi.
Is it, John? I have a legitimate question, because I mean, it's funny you mentioned that is sort of the template.
Oh, it's totally.
I know you're joking, but
he's not joking.
Yeah, well, not joking.
Yeah, joking, not joking. But is this?
No, it's Locke. He's 100% being serious. That he's sharing with you a publication formula to insert racism, bigotry, and toxic male ego into each series. That's what he's saying, is that people asking you to do that.
But where does it come from? Like, does it start there and then they build the story, or is there an example of toxic masculinity and then you write around it? I'm very curious about the percentage of the amount of times that they have the narrative before they write it down.
Well, look, by the way, in the age of social media, and to be fair, conservatives do this too. Like, in the age of social media, if you have a thesis, you can always find a Facebook comment, a blogger, a tweeter, a podcast. You can always find some element of evidence for your. In the age of Google, it's not difficult, and I think all sides do that. They have preformed thesis. But I think what happens, the phenomenon I'm describing, is that especially younger editors work backward from the reaction they expect to get on social media. So they sort of do a thought experiment, and
that's asinine.
Well, I mean, it's asinine, but from a career building perspective, it's understandable. Like, let's say you invest a month's worth of effort into a 5-part series on X, and you just know that Canadian Twitter being what it is, that the very first response is, I can't believe you did a 5-part series on X and you didn't include any non-binary or trans voices. And the editor themselves may think that's beside the point. There's no such thing as a non-binary ravine or whatever. And everyone involved may think that's ridiculous, but they don't want the headache of having to deal with it and having to respond to it. And, Jesse Brown on Canada Land saying, hey, they've literally exterminated trans ravine users or whatever. So what they do is they say, let's cover our asses. Let's do this article. And the worst that will happen is that it'll be completely ignored. And that usually that is the worst that can happen, unless some curmudgeon like me reads it and says, wait a sec, this is bullshit. And but how often does that happen? Like, I probably read 100 bullshit articles, and like, life is too short. So maybe one out of 100 times I'll actually write an article like this where I do a takedown. But statistically speaking, you are on safer ground if you run these unreadable social justice articles that, at least when someone comes at you and says, hey, you didn't cover the racist perspectives. Oh, well, we ran this article about how racist they are. And they're like, okay, you did, you get.
So weak though. It's so weak though. And I think when I read your piece, the first thing that popped into my head is something that I think probably popped into their heads when they wrote it, was that whole, remember the first Karen in Central Park? That just called the cops because apparently she saw a black man and she was like, what is a black man doing in Central Park?
Yeah, the black guy was bird watching.
Yeah, that's what I thought of. And I think that's maybe what they thought of too. Like, oh no, you don't think this happens? What about Karen in Central Park?
And of course, by the way, racism does happen. And I'm sure there are people listening to this who are not white and have had racist experience in the park. It would not be credible to say that it never happens. Like, there's all sorts of jerks in our society, including racist jerks. And just because you go to a park doesn't make you less of a racist. It probably does happen. But the fact that you would make this the centerpiece of an article with no evidence, like literally no evidence, and not visiting it, it was the journalistic incompetence that was there. And I don't even necessarily blame the reporters. To give them the benefit of the doubt, I doubt this was their idea. There was some editor who is sort of like checking off a box saying, have we done the racist article? Well, let's give it to these two juniors.
Wow.
Everyone got to pay their dues. And
it's like getting
fucking
punked.
Gaslighting, right? It's the, we all wonder what gaslighting is. This is gaslighting. It's inserting a narrative that isn't there because you're looking for something. You're looking for a cheap push or a bunch of clicks. And it's not just the Globe and Mail. It's Canada's national broadcaster. John had this tweet. He's like, great to see CBC Radio covering the racistness of bird watching today. There's a woodpecker in my neighbor's backyard who's been pecking All Lives Matter in Morse code for weeks now. and he's referring to this thing that the CBC put out. He's like, here's what's coming up on the show. And at the very end, it's like, this person on the intersection of birding and social justice. I'm like, oh, fuck. Thank God social justice has made its way into the world's worst hobby. Good for us.
So look, 99% of me is laughing and 1% of me is
dying on the inside.
Well, no, but this thing we saw in New York, what happened in New York City with this, I mean, there was a black guy who happened to be like a bird watching fanatic. And I don't even think we're supposed to say bird watching. Apparently it's birding. And there was, and
let me write that down.
John, watch this. Bird watching.
All right. But he was like victimized by real racism. Like someone was racist to him.
But that's not the park's fault. That's the racist's fault. So the racism could happen anywhere, right? Like it's not like the park is known for racism,
But that's what makes these discussions so fraught. Give you an example. I happen to be Jewish. I'm not like an observant Jew, but I'm Jewish enough for the anti-Semites, let's put it that way. And like every year, B'nai B'rith, which is a Jewish advocacy organization, they would put out a report about how anti-Semitism in Canada is increasing. And I mean, it was kind of ridiculous because, like, for the 187th straight year or whatever, like anti-Semitism is increasing. It's like, that can't be right. Anyway, so occasionally I would tweet like, look, there's definitely anti-Semitism somewhere in Canada. I happen to be Jewish. And in my experience, anti-Semitism is much less a problem than it was 20 years ago. Like 20 years ago, I got so much more anti-Semitic hate mail from people. Now it almost never happens. They send me hate mail for other reasons, but not because I'm Jewish. And
my ex-roommate sent you hate mail once, and I was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" He said that you were. He said that you worked.
Remember that one? That was.
He said you worked at the Zionist Post, and I was like, "What does that even mean?"
What kind of roommates do you have?
They were pretty bad. Yeah.
He was living with his drug dealer at the time.
I know. I think he was.
Now you know why I don't buy weed off him anymore.
Yeah,
but
right?
the point I was making was that every time I won't say every time, but if I would tweet a critique and say, look, I get it that B'nai B'rith is this watchdog against anti-Semitism, but there's some fear-mongering going around here. And I don't think Canada is an anti-Semitic country. I think it's one of the least anti-Semitic countries on earth. What happens is you tweet that, and like 6 months later, if some guy gets killed because he's Jewish in an anti-Semitic attack, and that happens. I mean, in a country of 35 million people, there's going to be occasionally anti-Semitic violence. The person then comes back at you and says, oh, do you still think, John, that Canada's not anti-Semitic, John? Like, what are you going to tell the grieving widow of this person who was killed because they were Jewish? Mm-hmm. And in that moment, it becomes unanswerable because statistically, yes, I maintain that Canada is not an anti-Semitic country, but in the face of an individual act which presents itself as contrary evidence, it's from an emotional point of view, you can't say, well, sorry, but like out of 35 million people, this isn't significant. So what happened, again, this is the same mentality as these editors of the Globe I'm talking about. You're saying things and covering things and tweeting things and forming at least publicly expressed opinions on the basis of how vulnerable you are to rebuttal or critique, even if it's irrational or makes no sense or not coherent or emotionally motivated or in bad faith. And this is a problem, and not just for people in the media. This happens just people who use social media. You're always worried what could happen in the next year that will make people screenshot this and call me a monster. So,
are you worried about Bill C-10?
Of course I'm worried. And I think I'm worried, like a lot of people, I'm worried both because of the substance of it, but also I just, it feels terrible to say, I do not trust the current government to be a good faith arbiter or even to appoint good faith arbiters of any kind of policy that could, even on a theoretical level, be used for content-based speech regulation. I do not trust this government to do that. I trust this government to do a lot of things. I trust Trudeau to regulate trade. I trust Trudeau to negotiate with the Americans. I've said it many times. I think Trudeau did a pretty good job of making sure that NAFTA wasn't amended in a way that would annihilate the Canadian economy. There are things I trust the Liberals to do. There are things I don't trust them to do, and there's things I don't trust any government to do. I don't trust any government to decide what content I should be able to watch and not watch. I mean, It's a necessary evil because the CRTC makes that distinction to some extent, but we shouldn't be expanding those powers, in my opinion.
So let's get into it because we're kind of touching on journalistic integrity in both cases, right? In the conversation that we're wrapping up when it comes to gaslighting and your story about the Globe and your subsequent story. Oh, look, now the Ravines are even racist. And we're touching on
that, don't you?
I really do. It made me laugh. We're talking about journalistic integrity, and I want to take the conversation about Bill C-10, and we'll get into just kind of the short strokes about Bill C-10 and what it's about. I don't think it's necessarily about governing free speech. I don't think it's about the cancellation of free speech in essence. And here's why. And let me explain this to you. For the past 5 to 7 years, there have been over 600 meetings between Bell, Rogers, and other major broadcasters. My theory on this is
who? With themselves or with
the government of the government of Canada.
It's actually the last year and a half. It was almost 600 meetings in the last year and a half. But go ahead.
Almost 600 meetings. So, pardon me, I stand corrected. That's an even better discussion for my narrative. Thank you. 600 meetings in the last year and a half. Now, the broadcasters have really placed this at the feet of the CRTC, and it's being sponsored by Stephen Guilbeault. I think that's how you say his name, right?
He can't even say his name.
No, he can't. And we'll get to that video in a second, too. But let me just kind of briefly, I'm going to bring these couple of different slides up so you can have a look at what is in this bill, what Bill C-10 is. Let's start here. Yeah, brief overview. Bill C-10. I want you to pay attention to a couple words. Broadcast undertaking are the two words I want you guys to kind of key on here. Bill C-10 amends the Broadcasting Act, the act set up for the broadcasting policy in Canada, the role of powers of the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, CRTC, in regulating and supervising the broadcasting system. And the mandate for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the act plays an important role in supporting Canada's cultural industries and ensuring Canadian content is available and accessible. That's what they want you to believe. Here
That's
we
bad
get into the
enough.
good stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
It sucks. The commission, an independent administrative tribunal, is responsible for determining the regulatory requirements to be imposed on broadcasting undertakings. Okay, so let's stop there because we're talking about broadcasting undertakings. Now, in the second piece here, they go and explain. Am I here on broadcasting? No. In the second piece here, they explain what the whole thing is really all about. It's not about culture. It's not about Canada. The following considerations support the consistency of the proposed regulatory requirements within Section 2B. The provisions aim to establish a fair competitive environment for online and traditional broadcasting services in Canada in the context of changing market trends that have not been favorable to traditional broadcasters. Okay? So what they said in the first little bit of the proposed bill was, hey, listen, this is an act that we want to broadcast. We want to take care of broadcast undertakings, right? So it's broadcast undertakings. That's their concern. Now, they're saying that really what we're doing here in that last piece, what we're doing here is we're trying to put social media, which is killing traditional media, on the same plane. We're trying to get back what has been taken from broadcasters who pay licensing fees, who have had to pay for, brick and mortar places to broadcast, television stations, radio stations, who the value of those properties is zero right now. Well, zero is extreme, but you know what I mean. It's not what it used to be. Revenues are 20 million down to 5 million for most big radio stations in this market. So they lost like 75-80% of their market value. They lost a whole bunch of revenue. Traditional media isn't worth anything because digital media has come up underneath it, bubbled, and destroyed it, right? Destroyed revenue, destroyed every ability that they have to be able to drive revenue, because now you have not just three main pillars of communication in this country. You've got millions of people who are ready to share information, and it's not regulated, so everybody wants that because it's real. Then when you get down to it, and this is the part that I have a problem with, the bill would create a number of powers for the collection and the disclosure of information for regulatory laws that would empower the commission to make orders imposing conditions carrying on broadcasting undertakings, including conditions with respect to the provision of information to the commission. So the first part there is important. You need to know what it is. The second part there, not as important, but still fairly important. The basis for everything that they're doing is to come and put conditions on people's broadcasting undertakings that are online. So what does that mean for people? What does that mean
that
for
was
people
added
like us?
after the fact too? That was not in the original draft. That's the part that a lot of people are focusing on right now and calling the government out for with respect to inconsistencies about the messaging, right?
Right.
If you're not concerned about what all these podcasters and whatnot are doing, why did you add a clause in there that directly impacts them?
And it's not just the podcasters. It's anything you put on social media if you are a broadcaster. So in our case, we've got 34 different podcasts, 34 different shows, right? So because it all originates under DeanBlundell.com, each one of those 33 shows would then be subject to the same rules, which are fugazi, by the way. They're just fucked. The CRTC rules and regulations. This is the only rule and regulation that CRTC has. If someone complains, you're in trouble. If they don't complain, we don't care. Those are the rules of the CRTC.
It's worth saying out loud that the CRTC actually doesn't even handle the complaints. There's a separate regulatory body that deals with the complaints that everybody thinks the CRTC is responsible for. And that's why what's his nut, the guy that's supposed to be selling this, and that interview that he did, I can't remember his name, but he's
even Gilbo.
That's why he was struggling with the conversation, because he was like, the CRTC doesn't even do this. And what he meant was there's a separate body that even deals with this. The CRTC is just the face of it. Everyone thinks when they complain about the locker room, they're phoning the CRTC, and the CRTC goes, this has nothing to do with us.
Goes to the
Locke
CBSC.
said cock on the air. You got to go to the CBSC, right?
Yeah.
And then there's all these steps that you need to take in order to get it to the next level. That's where the confusion lies, and that's
and not just the confusion in the messaging, but it's confusion in what's being regulated. And the language in this is so vague when they say something like online or broadcasting
idiots.
undertakings
They're idiots.
that what they're saying is we can't really describe it yet. We just know we want to go after those people because big media is tired of social media eating their lunch.
They're going to go after. They said they're going to go after places like YouTube instead of the person or entity that is posting onto YouTube. So YouTube now YouTube becomes the target. Also, just from that first paragraph that you read, they basically also want to turn us into the CBC, right? Yeah. The CBC has to obey all these rules of CanCon and on all that type of stuff. But the best thing about the internet was that it's not regulated. That's why we're here. That's why podcasting and long form interviews are taking the place of these commercial interrupted interviews.
To be fair to the Canadian government as well, there are other countries that are trying to get money out of these massive billion-dollar companies because they're not paying anything. And this is where I struggle with it. Like Bill C-10, if you start breaking it down and looking at it, I mean, I'm with John. Do I trust the Liberal government to be regulating these types of things? No, I don't. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair that conventional radio, terrestrial radio, has to pay all these licensing fees, Spotify, YouTube, and all of these other services that like everyone on the planet's using, are getting away without paying any of it. It's not even the CanCon regulations that I give a shit about. That's what a lot of people are going to focus on. James just mentioned it. They're trying to turn them into CBC. They'll find ways, Amazon Prime and Netflix, they'll find ways of getting around the Canadian content rules.
Well, but those aren't even the problems. Like they're dressing this up, John. I could be wrong, but it looks like the government is dressing this up like they're going after Google, Facebook, etc. But it really looks like, and by the genesis of this bill with the 600 plus meetings with Bell, Rogers, Chorus, etc., it's big media going after small content providers, and it's just being dressed up like, oh, we're trying to protect Canadian culture and Canadian content.
Well, I think the messaging was much more defensible before user-generated content was added to the purview. Mm-hmm. I think in its original form, it was defensible. And so when we talk about other countries, like Australia is a good example. Yeah. And Australia, from what I understand, wasn't primarily concerned with regulating content. They were concerned with media companies getting ripped off, because you could you could go on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube and just watch all kinds of content, a lot of it sort of lifted or adapted or recirculated from original media providers, and
who are footing the bill of the licensing fees.
And they're not even getting ad money. And YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all the rest, they're getting the ad money because the eyeballs come to the aggregator sites, the social media sites, and they're getting the eyeball. That aspect, I think the way Australia handled it was created problems, because Facebook, this affected Quilette, which is my company, my boss's company, Claire Lehman, who's based in Australia. So for a while, media companies based in Australia, including Quilette, could not put their articles up on Facebook.
Facebook just said F you and shut everything down.
Well, they played hardball with the Australian government, and this has influenced the debate in Canada, because there's very real fear they do the same thing in Canada. And for a lot of, I think in our case, that was like 10 or 15% of our traffic was just shut down. And Facebook doesn't do this often, but it was kind of reminding people, like, yes, on one hand, we're taking eyeballs and maybe some cash away from big media companies, but we're also driving traffic to a lot of these smaller, Quilette is a fairly small compared to a lot of these broadcast companies. So maybe they were also reminding people, like, you get a lot of benefits out of this too. The problem is the benefits are like, if you're something like Quilette, you profit enormously from social media, because it's thanks to social media that our articles go viral. Whereas if you run a kind of like broadcast or radio or TV programming, you don't care if your content's going viral if you're not getting any money out of it, or if your site isn't getting any clicks or eyeballs out of it. So I think there's very divided loyalties in the media class. But I certainly think that the original plan was the most defensible before user-generated content was added. Once you throw in user-generated content, you really do get the possibility of the nightmare scenario where just everybody who uploads a YouTube video that the federal government or somebody the federal government doesn't like gets ensnared in this regulatory process. And from a PR perspective,
can we be honest though, John?
Yeah.
They're not going to go after though. I mean, as much as I think we should be concerned and it's worth the conversation, I'm not completely throwing it out with the bathwater, but they are not.
But they're leaving themselves, dude. But my issue is
that's lobbying.
They're leaving that door open.
Yeah,
that's right? Lobbying. Bell, Rogers, Chorus. They were like, you need to put these things in there.
But can I just introduce a counterexample where I'm old enough to remember that, like 20 years ago, when you would have a conversation about, say, human rights tribunals, and someone would say, "Oh my God, these human rights tribunals, they're regulating offensive speech. You know, one of these days it's going to be illegal, or at least against human rights law, to quote from certain passages of the Bible." And people say, "No, that's crazy talk." And yet, you know, there was a case out of Saskatchewan a couple of years ago, and in fact, there's a case ongoing in Britain right now where people have been taken up successfully on human rights charges for quoting from the Bible. Now, I happen not to be a Christian; it doesn't affect me directly, but I do know that when it comes to speech regulation, today's the legal power exists, but it'll never be used, that can very quickly become a situation where they actually use it to censor speech they don't like, and
because it's there, right? Like it's
crazy.
It's kind of like the guy that buys a gun because he's never going to use it, right? I'll just buy a gun to own it, and then he ends up using it, and you're like, fuck, because he bought a gun.
If I told you 10 years ago that people were going to be thrown off social media for referring to the biological sex of people who present as transgender, if I told you that would happen, you'd think I was absolutely crazy. And yet here we are.
John's not wrong. That's a good point.
But that's just because nobody had a chance to say goodbye to Bruce Jenner. That's all.
And Bruce Jenner, by the way, if I can segue, Bruce Jenner has now become the Judas of the transgender rights movement, because this week he came out and said, hey, you know what? If you're born male, maybe it's not the best idea, to compete in women's sports. And so Bruce, I'm not allowed to say Bruce Jenner, but Caitlyn Jenner is like, he has become their Trotsky. He's become like a sellout. George Takei, of all people, is now saying that Jenner is a sellout to the movement.
Is that because of what Caitlyn said the other day, where she said, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said, "Hey, listen, you can't have male to female trans people competing with females in their sport of choice." And if I for one, James and I have talked about it. I want to see that mess. I really do. Like, a lot of people are railing against it. I want to see how it shakes out. So I say, you let everybody compete with everybody, and who cares? But I get what you're saying, because, if we're going to take the woke letter of transgender law and we're going to say, okay, all people should be, allowed to compete with all people, right? Like, if we're going to push this into the non-binary arena, what Caitlyn Jenner said goes directly against everything trans people have been fighting for.
Well,
she's also an Olympian, so she knows, right?
I think that's a slur. That's a slur on trans people, though, because 99% of trans people are completely reasonable individuals who they don't want to destroy women's sports by having, natal males compete in these categories. Like, most trans people, they're like everybody else. Most people are not activists, and most activists are not crazy activists. The trans activist community, as with all activist communities, from a media attention point of view, it tends to be the people who are the most strident, who get the most attention, and make these kind of like very emphatic declarations, like, self-identification should be the basis for which prison you go to, which sport you compete in, this, that, and the other. And I don't think it's fair to trans people themselves to attribute that very radical view, as I see it, to mainstream transgender opinion, which I think, as with every community, is probably more reasonable than the firebrands who present themselves as representative of that community, in my opinion.
I'm kind of with Dean on the discussion about letting them do whatever they want, because
have you spoken to women about that? How do women feel about that?
Well, no,
I haven't,
I mean,
and I don't think we should. I think I'm. Go ahead, Locke. Be interested to hear what you're going to say.
You
if
guys
you're
are just
agreeing with me.
nihilists. You're just nihilists. But go ahead.
No. Well, here's the reason why I think it should be interesting. Can we take that screen down? I can't see any of your pretty faces. What happened?
Yeah.
there?
Sorry. There
Is
you
that
go.
stuck?
How's that?
Is-
Yeah, it's
No.
stuck on your end.
Yeah, it's
It's
stuck on my end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So and this sort of loosely ties, very loosely, and keep up with me. Sometimes I lose my point because I'm not that smart. But I was watching this little piece on TSN about Chuba Hubbard, who is a football player who just got drafted in this year's NFL draft. And he was a local boy. So they had a piece on him. So I was paying attention to it. And this kid, they were showing this kid playing football in Edmonton. And he was running through the whole team, clearly twice as fast as every kid at every level. And he was just a complete stud. And then he got drafted in the United States and went down to the US, and he was dead last on all the depth charts. Because why? Because he wasn't starting at 13 using human growth hormones and testosterone. And if you watch college football, man, those guys they're huge. They're massive. It's out of hand. Sports as a whole is completely out of hand. And I mean, that's where I'm at that's why I agree with Dean. I mean, it is what it is, right? We tune in to see the best and the strongest.
Yeah.
And however they got there, I got the blinders on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but a woman's gonna get killed though. Like that's the thing. Like in some rugby match or some boxing match or some MMA match, and everyone's gonna be like, this is the politically correct thing to do, and then all of a sudden a woman is gonna get her neck broken in the ring, and people are like, maybe we shouldn't have done this. It's like, yeah,
that's why. But you know what? Right. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I stayed out of the conversation. It happened.
It happened in the MMA, yeah,
with Fallon Fox.
That's right.
And crushed some poor woman's skull in, and then Outsports magazine proclaimed that Fallon Fox was like their woman of the century or whatever. Like I couldn't believe it. Like this is now the progressive position that bashing in the cranium of a natal woman earns you high honors in the LGBT sports world. It was insane.
Well, that's the thing about the trans issue, though, is that that thing's still on my screen too. If you could take that, I don't know if it comes off, but and finally, I have a guess that I can say this, and it actually fits. But the J.K. Rowling thing, that you have the most successful. True, they're laughing, but John, you like, come on, John. I hope you have my back on this one, because
of course I have your back.
The progressive position is to take the most successful woman writer for children's books, nonetheless, of all time, and turn a blind eye to all of the death. She has to be the most abused woman online in the world today. She has to be. And every progressive is just like, oh, well, she shouldn't have said that thing in that one tweet.
Is that all because she said that, like, trans women who go from male to female can't have a period? Wasn't that it?
No. It was said what 90% of people actually think, which is that, hey, I support trans rights. We should do our best to accommodate them and to make them feel welcome and not discriminated against. But biology matters, and there are certain sectors of society in which your biology is actually meaningful, which is like 90% of people, probably more than 90%, even people who pretend not to believe that, do believe it. Mm-hmm. And for giving voice to that, as James said, she's been subject to all this completely misogynistic abuse. And I don't think it's a coincidence that she is the most beloved and successful author in the world for children, that she's getting this abuse, because a lot of this is just tall poppy syndrome, like the chance for less successful, less talented people to take down the top dog. And a lot of, not all, but a lot of social justice is a pretext for that kind of thing, especially here in Canada. We've seen it with Atwood and Galloway and a number of, and Peterson, certainly. It's quite terrible what she's endured. And look, we expect reactionary conservatives to be sexist and, stereotypically they're often vile to women. This is progressive doing this. Mm-hmm. And it's completely discredited the progressive movement in my view, because it's shown them to be complete hypocrites. They've gone from Me Too to Who Cares on that issue, protecting women in the blink of an eye. And, to me, it's extremely unprincipled. So I'm with James on this issue.
And you know what? It's interesting because, like, Locke probably agrees with me on this part of it too, is that there's a zero-sum effort when you're a white man who's not gay, and you're talking about whether or not people go too far, right? And so I've always taken, and I've been of the opinion that I can't comment on someone's experience, right? So if I said all trans people should think this, or all black people shouldn't be upset about this, or if I go into a conversation about these kinds of topics, I shut down, because I don't want to have to deal with. But the thing is, I don't want to have to deal with any part of what comes back from the crazies. That's the first part. And the second part is, and maybe this is the justification that I tell people, and why I tell people I don't get into these conversations or don't write about these topics, because I don't have those experiences. I'm not a black man. I'm not a trans person. I can't speak to the journey that they're on or what they've gone through. So I understand the metrics of what you're talking about, and I would agree with you. But I don't think that you can say in this day and age, specifically in media, when you're disseminating information and you're trying to have some kind of intellectual opinion on the goings on of the day, specifically when it comes to these topics, I don't feel like a 48-year-old white dude's entitled to talk about it with any kind of empathy at all.
Right, but I'm somewhat surprised to hear you say that, because, well, I know that conservatives, for many years, men were told you're not allowed to have an opinion on abortion because you're never going to have a child. And I think probably a lot of people would reject that and say, look, abortion is a moral issue. And even if you're a man, you don't have a direct biological stake in the game, but you're allowed to have an opinion on this. In the case of some of this gender stuff, it doesn't just affect people in transgender community. It affects, in the case of whether biological males are admitted to women's prison, or sports, it affects everybody who's the father or mother of an athlete. In terms of prisons, it disproportionately affects Indigenous women, who are vastly overrepresented in our prison system. But because these people aren't on Twitter and don't use hashtags, and don't run trendy media outlets, their voice is often ignored. It's also, everyone here on this conversation, to some extent, we're like amateur media critics. And so you can see when fair play or an absence of fair play is exhibited on a given issue. One thing that's amazing about this issue we're talking about, and we're seeing this with the reaction to Caitlyn Jenner and what she said, is that even trans people now are getting canceled if they say the wrong thing about trans issues. So even assuming what you said is 100% right, that like, if you're not in group X, you shouldn't talk about group X. You have people in group X, where X is the transgender community, who, if what they say is ideologically non-compliant, they're vilified. And that to me is something that we can, even as straight white men, we can point out, like, that's crazy. That this is not the kind of media or ideological or social media environment we want to be in, where everyone is insisting on this rigorous adherence to like state-of-the-art ideological conformity.
And even when you're talking, a lot of social activism is like that. Like I have a friend who is, I wouldn't say he's a conservative black dude, but he's certainly not really far left leaning. I would call him a moderate, I guess. And he's like, there's no room. He's like, the only black voices that especially activists want to hear are far, far left, often Marxist voices. They don't want to hear from black conservative voices or moderate voices.
And you'll get white people attacking them. You'll get white people saying, you've lost your black card. Like there's in Portland, the craziest scenes out of Portland was when you'd have some white guy screaming at a black police officer doing his job and saying, you're a sellout to black people.
It was a woman, actually. I remember that clip.
Well, there's a few clips. I mean, you saw this in other cities where like these privileged white people were screaming at some working class cop who happened to be black or Asian or whatever, and like lecturing them about like, that you're a sellout to your race. Like, who the fuck are you? But this has become common, that like the idea that there's an authentic ideological point of view you should have based on your skin color.
Well, and then the other issue, to take that one step further, is, I mean, you need that representation in the police department, especially in the United States of America. And if they're being called out at gatherings like that, and it becomes public and it becomes viral, what do you think the chances are somebody, at a young age who might be considering getting into the police department sees that and goes, it's not for me. And then all of a sudden you're your numbers in the police department are dwindling. Like I've heard even stories in Canada where if 15, 20 years ago, it was impossible to get into the police academy. Now it's like they're standing on the street going, "Hey, want to be a cop? Come in."
Yeah,
it takes they're begging
Minnesota.
for people.
I mean, Minnesota is spending $6 million. I think $6 million to recruit new cops because, first of all, the places that are most disadvantaged, like the hardest hit black neighborhoods in Minneapolis, you have crime surging because there's not being policed, and grassroots constituencies are saying we need more cops. And then, a surprise, you have all these early retirements, and you can't do recruitment because you spend the last 6 months talking about how cops are monsters. And gee, what a shocker! You're not being able to get cops, and now suddenly it's like, please sign up to become a police officer. It's like a modern day Aesop's fable, where and the people who pay the price are not the upper middle class white people who were stunningly and bravely hashtagging about how we need to abolish the police. Because, I mean, and I see that in my neighborhood. I live in a very nice neighborhood and I love my neighbors, but like all these signs I see like, oh, I've gotten by for 20 years without needing the police. Why do we need the police force? It's like, yeah, you rarely need the police if you live in that kind of privileged life. Yeah. Until you arrive at your country house and someone's vandalized your speedboat, then you call the police. But other than that, you don't care about the police. But the people who need the police are typically people who live in impoverished communities. And look, some of those people have their own legitimately horrible experiences with police. I get that. But I am so sick of people with no exposure to real life, including in my own neighborhood, lecturing me about how we can get by just fine without the police.
And you see that a lot. You see that a lot in the polling, especially in places like Chicago, and in places like the Bronx and places like that. The Black Lives Matter sort of credo is a minority view. Pardon the pun, I think. But in places like that, those places want the cops to have a presence. Because all these people trying to raise
cops, right?
What's that?
They just don't want bad cops, which
right,
there are.
But they also don't want. They also don't want. They don't want gang members dealing drugs on their corner, right? And so they would rather have patrol there to sort of thin that out. And they know that there's problematic cops. They know that there's cops that have heavy batons, and they don't want that either. But you take cops out of the situation in places like Los Angeles or Chicago or New York, and crime's going to surge, right? And these are innocent Black families are going to be impacted. It was not funny, but Breonna Taylor's mother got completely annihilated on social media last week, I think it was, because she was saying, Black Lives Matter raised a lot of money off of my dead daughter, and they haven't come to me and said, hey, we want to help you. They just raised money, and then they just left her alone. And so she criticized them in a social media post, and then she was so harassed that she had to take the social media post down because she was being leveled.
Crazy.
Yeah,
it's craziness, right? Like that's the world that we live in. Live in a weird time where white people are deciding the course of racial action. And white people, straight people on behalf of the trans group are telling us how we should act and questions we should ask or questions we should stay away from or statements of thought that we can't have because it's just not cool to have these statements of thought or certain opinions. My inability to write or talk about these things comes directly from my theory that listen, I don't have the gumption to be able to say whether or not that person experienced racism in the workplace because I'm not Black, but I can make that judgment privately. You know what I mean? And I know it surprises you, John, to hear that. And it's not that I'm afraid of going into those spaces, but you know what happens? What happens is the second that you start talking about it, I can tell you what'll happen when we put out a promo about this conversation. Oh, great! 4 white dudes sitting around talking. Straight white dudes.
Totally legitimate criticism. I mean, and so I'll give you an example. It wasn't so long ago. I think it was 5 or 6 years ago. CBC knew. It's kind of funny, actually. They did the cut line at the bottom was, is racism real? The experience of Black Canadians, and the 4 people they had on looked like the 4 of us. And it was something that would be absolutely unthinkable today, but It is. I mean, it is. It was legitimately ridiculous that was seen as a normal thing to do. Like, and when people complain about, oh, the media is so politically correct, like the first half of the politically correct revolution is always legitimate, and then the second half goes overboard. It's like any kind of cultural process of reaction and counter-reaction. And if you look at a lot of the stuff that was just the sort of jokes people told, or the sort of way people were treated in the workforce 10 or 20 years ago, it's legitimate that there was a pushback against that. A lot of that stuff was wrong. I just want to say that as a Canadian, when people talk about abolishing the police, there's actually this incredible case study from Canada that no one talks about, or few people talk. In 1969, Montreal's police went on strike for a day, and there's a CBC did a documentary on it. If you look at Montreal police strike 1969, it was like complete bedlam. Someone hijacked a city bus and drove it through a plate glass window because they were mad at a taxi company. Like, no, it was crazy. I mean, it was like Escape from New York type stuff. And people are like, yes, that's the world I want. That's that's what I would like. We've tried this. Or look at Seattle's so-called they called it the Chaz, then they called it the Chop, or whatever the hell they called it.
Zone, yeah.
It was there were murders. It was a big crap hole. I mean, the first few weeks apparently were people
little kumbaya, but
total kumbaya, and then exactly what you would predict would happen happened, which is
Lord of the Flies. Yeah, that's dude, and that's. I wonder, how do we go back? Like, are we ever going to be in a time when we can call things as we see it and not get canceled for it, or not get
But that's a mythical time, because that's a mythical time. I mean, don't forget, conservatives played the cancel culture game really well when they were in charge. Ask any gay person what it was like to talk about, to just tell it like it is about gay love in the 60s or 70s or 80s. The war on terror. Like, if you were a Muslim in the weeks or months or even years after 9/11, there were certain things you weren't allowed to say. Conservatives have played the last 2,000 years or so. Conservatives have been really good at their own kind of cancel culture.
So we're on the other side of it a bit. Yeah,
I was a lot more progressive when 9/11 happened than I am now, I think, or at least the way progressivism seems to be now. But I remember being on a flight that left Toronto. I was going to Lima. My ex was Peruvian. We were going to go spend Christmas and New Year's in Lima. And on Christmas Eve, we were on American Airlines flight number 13. And it was right after 9/11, right? And right in the middle of the flight, this man dressed in Muslim garb started pacing really fast in the aisle and nodding his head and praying. And I was nervous. I was just nervous. I'm not a religious person anyways, as it is, but I was like, 9/11, the smoke was still kind of rising, like maybe it almost stopped, but it was like so fresh in our minds. And that was happening. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, I hope someone tackles him. It felt, because I had never seen that before and I've never seen it since. And so I'm just sort of saying that, like, I think that we can be excused for some of our,
cognitive
nervousness.
biases. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't think I would do that today. I probably think to myself, as an atheist, I'm more offended than as a person thinking that he's going to get hijacked,
is when I go online and I'm on Twitter and I'm attacking cancel culture or progressive overreach on issues of like race, often the people who are my biggest supporters are Muslims or immigrants who have come from countries where they're trying to escape censorship or often it's maybe people who are older who used to live behind the Iron Curtain. They're in former communist countries. But
they see the damage it did, right?
Yeah. Or like some of my biggest supporters on Twitter lately have actually been Iranians. They're people who live in Canada. They fled Iran because they were disgusted with a very different kind of ideological program, which is obviously religiously inspired. And they don't want to have people in their new country. They gave up a lot to come here. And now that they're here, they don't want some upper middle class white guy telling them what kind of pronouns to use or hashtags, or telling them they have to report to anti-racist training, even though they're not even white. They're like, we left another country to avoid all that, like the equivalent of that crap. And they're the people, they actually give me hope for the future of Canada, because I trust them a lot more when it comes to issues of censorship or due process, liberal values, civil liberties. I trust them more than your average pampered white guy who takes all those things for granted and feels guilty all the time and is willing to give up civil liberties if it lets him feel less guilty for a while. I'm more inclined to trust a guy who came to this country in order to escape liberal values.
Which brings us to a clip I wanted to play in reference to censorship. If you were confused about the bill C-10, the sponsor of the bill, Stephen Guilbeault, whose claim to fame up until becoming the heritage minister of this country is that he climbed a tree when he was 5, and he also climbed the CN Tower for Greenpeace when he was 31. He doesn't have any political training, never did. He's an activist, and he was asked on CBC on the weekend, Canada's national broadcaster, to explain why Canada wants to censor people. I want you to listen. This is the guy in charge of the censorship bill. I want you to listen to his explanation. This is awesome.
I would ask for the date of that quote because the Justice Department itself has said otherwise. We are seeing this government mimic behavior that is consistent with a basic dictatorship. It's wrong. With their transformational edit that they just made to Bill C-10, the Liberals are trying to give themselves the power to control what Canadians can read online, what they post on social media, and the videos that they watch on YouTube. Again, it's wrong. Why is the government doing this?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that press release was issued yesterday. I think what we're seeing now is, these are big, powerful, in fact, some of the wealthiest corporations on the planet. And clearly, the member opposite and her party are just afraid to stand up to them. And again, it seems that the Conservative Party is listening to the most extremist element of their party, as they have on very important issues such as climate change or women's rights to choose, Mr. Speaker.
So now he's an extremist, right? Like now he's telling everybody that if you don't like the bill, you're a fucking extremist. What?
You know whose fault that is? Jagmeet Singh's. And I'll tell you why. Because he's going to support this bill. The NDP will support this bill. And if you just noticed 2 days ago, all of a sudden, out of left field, Justin Trudeau started talking about $10 childcare spaces, which is a completely NDP idea. So that was the quid pro quo. They're going to give him his childcare spaces, and he's going to prop up this bill. In my opinion, I mean, I'm just predicting. But
John, did you finish that clip? Were you able to get through that
stuff like that?
Yeah, I was like, how can I talk about how can I mansplain abortion to this woman inside of like 30 seconds? Like it was like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It was like 6 degrees of abortion.
Oh, God.
How do I get to abortion?
Can we go back to my point? I know everyone's concerned about Bill C-10. Like, I understand that, but these idiots, they're not going to find a way to control content online. It's never going to happen.
Dude, that's what they're doing.
It's never going to happen.
That's what they're saying.
I hope that's true. It's worth spending a minute savoring the unbelievable and incompetent cynicism of Guilbeault and like, how can I get to abortion and climate change while mimicking someone on cocaine? Because he just looked completely like he was like sped up by 30%. He looked just completely agitated. And
why does he sounds like Chris Sky?
But you know what? A skilled politician would be able to pull that off. Like if he didn't look so defensive and agitated, it's like, well, Mr. Speaker, I think what's really being asked here is what, like he would find some smooth way of going from fighting big companies, fighting big oil companies, fighting climate change, kind and gentle, women, abortion. Like you can see how if you took 2 minutes and you were the right kind of speaker, you could develop it. Yeah. But he lacks any of those skills. So he just freaked out and basically started stammering about abortion.
He also misrepresented what the bill was about. He said he was standing up to the bill to the big telecom companies when they're the biggest benefactors of this bill.
I don't mind dishonesty and cynicism. What I don't like is incompetence.
Yeah,
and
they're all kind of one and the same. Distinction without a difference in a way.
I don't know. It's I mean, Trudeau is usually
me how you've gotten over that, John.
Trudeau
please.
does his
Begging
homework.
you.
Trudeau does his homework when he has this kind of thing to do. I mean, look, politicians are disingenuous, and Trudeau has actually gotten quite good at squaring those circles and getting to that point. But some of the people under him, McKenna, this guy Guilbeault, they just, they flunked media training. And either be honest or be competent. But if you lack both, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If you lack both, run for office. Jesus, mother of...
Maybe this is a good time to talk about Chris Sky, because if I can open with this and then throw it to you, Dean, because I spoke to Nick Cavalis on the phone today, who told me something that you would never know if you just were reading our daily newspapers and online content from the legacy outlets, which is that, you know what conservatives and liberals have in common is that they both blame both the people in Ontario. They both blame the Ford government and the Trudeau government roughly equal, and it doesn't matter if you're liberal or conservative. And you never read about that, right? Like, you only read about people that hate Ford and people that hate Trudeau. But as it turns out, what we have in common with our ideological opposites is that we actually think of this sort of like the way that COVID's been handled. We're roughly identical with who we're blaming on this.
Kenny's doing the exact same thing in Alberta. He's bringing the right and the left together where they all equally hate him. And it's the first time we've seen this kind of unity in this province.
Yeah.
There's one thing we all share.
I would venture guess to say the same thing here.
Yeah.
So one thing we share is just equal hatred of the people that are supposed to be in charge of, keeping us safe, keeping us informed, all the things that we have grown up to think government is prior to the last few years, right? Which is, at every point in time during the pandemic, we've been let down by every level of government. We really have. And
back to my point, they're all idiots. All of them. They're all fucking idiots. Okay. Every single one of them.
Easy, fella. Easy.
Before we go any further, you want idiot. Here's Stephen Guilbeault again being asked on Power and Politics. This is a great clip.
This idea that we're going after content that people would post, that's not it. But if YouTube is acting like a broadcaster when it comes to music, then they should be treated like a broadcaster. And what the bill, the bill is not about content moderation. The bill is about ensuring that these platforms that act like broadcasters pay their fair share when it comes to Canadian culture. So it's about spending obligations, spending requirements. It's not about content moderation.
So I'm going to flip the question for a moment here, Minister, because it was important enough to put that exclusion there in the first place. Now it's gone. Why was it important in the first place to put it there?
We're not interested. I mean, it's not what the bill is about.
I mean, I hear you saying you're not interested, but there literally was an exclusion that was put in the original iteration of that bill, the thing that was reviewed, and then it got to committee, and bingo, bango, bongo, the exclusion is gone. So why was it important to put it there in the first place, such that now the committee has removed it?
Well, I mean, the committee decides what they want. The bill, first of all, the committee hasn't even finished doing its work in terms of the amendments. So we don't have a full picture of what the bill will look like when it comes back to the House of Commons for third reading.
Would you like to see the exclusion back in there?
It's not necessary. I mean, so
if it's not necessary, why was it there in the first place?
Well, we've worked on this for many months. We came up with what we thought would be the best possible bill, but bill can always be perfected. They will be amended, and it's not the purpose.
Oh my God,
that guy's in charge.
Oh my God, I couldn't even listen to
in Canada.
Is that the first time you've seen that, John?
You know what? I don't know if you guys were having. I don't know if the stream was being choppy for you guys, but that was the best that he sounded last time I saw that clip.
John, Is that the first time you've seen that?
I've seen other parts of the interview and I've seen it described. That's the first time I've actually listened to it. And it's like, I found it very difficult to listen to because it's like watching somebody, I don't know, like fall, like
die,
give a wedding speech and, I don't know, like fall on his face into the cake or something. I mean, it was just like, I've never seen anyone in any liberal, conservative, I've never seen a federal government minister speak in such an ignorant and unprepared way. It's crazy. Like, and he's speaking about his portfolio.
Answer the question.
He's speaking about a bill that he's sponsoring that's going to change the landscape of media in this country. That's going to prevent everybody from sharing anything.
But
like, think
on.
about that. That guy that just, dude, that's him. That guy climbed the fucking CN Tower.
I'm not defending him. I can't live in a world where they're going to try to find a way
Suck it up,
to
dude.
moderate the internet. It's not going to happen, Dean.
It is.
We're one of 9 million
is in charge of it, and he
podcasts
can't
on the
even
internet.
get through a fucking sentence. He can't explain it. Hey, why'd you take the thing out? Well, it didn't need to be there. Well, why'd you put it in the first place? I don't know. What's next? The bill's not even done. I didn't even write it. Like, that's exactly what he just said. He just is like, well, what's in the bill? I don't know. It goes to committee. Well, fuck, who knows, right? It's just a dumb bill. Like, that's what we're getting here. And the entire country is up in arms going, oh, hold it. That means that guy is in charge of what I get to say online.
Yeah.
Like, fucking dude, it's right there. And when he's pressed, Gilbo says, I don't know. Like, fucking whatever.
So, Dean,
man.
let me ask you a legitimate question. Let's say the bill goes through tomorrow. Are you going to change anything that you're doing in your life right now?
Yes.
As a podcast czar.
We already are. Dude, I am so balls deep into moving this thing onto blockchain, and no one knows about it. Web 3.0. I have no desire to do this on the regular internet anymore. None. And so I've been having meetings and conversations with people about moving this into the blockchain world in the next year to 2 years, maybe even 6 months, because I don't want to have anything to do with this jack off or anybody else that tells me that I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. Listen, hate speech is already policed by Canada's criminal code. You can't do hate speech. So that's covered, right? Netflix has all you have to do is put in Canada on your search button on Netflix. They have more Canadian programming than any radio station, television station in this country has ever had. So this isn't about Netflix. I get Facebook and I get Google, but that's a different argument. Like
they don't care about content. It's about the dollars. It's all they care about.
No. Incorrect. It's about Canada's private broadcasters who have met with this guy 500 times in the last year, trying to get him to put the clam on everybody like us that is stealing everything from them because they were too slow and too stupid to embrace the tech. That's what it is.
If I was the conservatives
exactly
right now,
I don't disagree with you on that.
Run off of? If I was the conservatives, I would run on and making regular broadcast.
They were
equal
James. They were.
Yeah, but then they got all racist and stuff. Then they got all racist and climate change deny and all that other stuff. And it's like, listen, all the conservatives really had to do was just be normal, and they couldn't even fucking do that. So, I'll vote for anybody that gets rid of the CRTC and the CBSC. But I'll vote for anybody other than Justin Trudeau in this election because of the shit that we just saw and what he's trying to do. And I'm with John. I don't trust these guys.
No.
They look like they want it to all be woke. They look like they want everybody to be on the same. They don't. Do you think that Bell, Rogers, Chorus would be pushing this through without the CRTC's approval in a time that wasn't a national health crisis? No. No, everything about this reeks, dude. Everything. And it's one thing.
I just don't think it's feasible to assume that this government, who has that guy as the heritage minister, is going to be able to negotiate what it would take in order to, like, this isn't China.
Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing.
I get that China does this and they regulate, and that if you're if you have a voice or you say something that they're not happy about, they'll lock you down. We don't have that kind of organization in this country. That's my only.
No, but what we do have is a government that is willing to look at it. That's what this is. They're willing to put a bunch of vague language into a bill and then say, let's see what happens. Let's see if people freak out enough. That's what this is.
Are they being forced by our billion-dollar cell phone companies?
Yes.
I just think it's just the lobbyists, and that's
Dude,
why
Bell's lawyers, Rogers' lawyers, Chorus's lawyers. I know some of these people. I know several of them that have been in meetings for well over a year, hundreds of meetings, saying, listen, we need to get all those little guys whose only competitive advantage is the flexibility of content, and we need to put them under the same regulatory umbrella as we are. Otherwise, we're going to keep losing our shit. It doesn't matter. The horse is out of the barn. There's no way they're going to be able to stop people. It's the idea that they want to. It's the idea that and listen to what John was saying earlier in the conversation, the skullduggery in media, the lack of ethics in media. Rogers and Bell didn't grow to be the behemoths they are because they just like money, dude. They want to control the narrative. And now that they're losing their shirts, they want that back too. And that's what this is to me. Sure, it's overreach and all the other stuff. It's not about Nazism or dictatorships or fascism or communism or whatever idiot wants to put on a, on a piece of paper to describe what's going on here. That has nothing to do with it. To me, this is about, and I don't have an axe to grind with traditional media, not that much anymore anyway, but I do have, but dude, I can tell you that this is a huge driver. Bell, Rogers Media, a huge driver of this bill. We know that. Mm-hmm. We know that, and that's why we're here. Also, because Stephen Gilbert will do anything someone tells him to. Hey, dude, go defend this bill on TV. I don't know. It's like, and he does it, and he looks like an idiot doing it. Anyway,
no, because that's what there.
Yeah, that was Dion-esque. I agree with that.
Great point. Yeah,
nice.
Think this goes? Do you think anything comes of this, or do you think the liberal government quashes this, John?
I love the fact that like the primary defense of this is like, well, this guy's so incompetent that this isn't like communist China, because how is it credible that this clown could ever get this through? Like, I think we're grasping at straws if we're pointing to that as being the saving grace of it. I have no instincts about whether this is going through. My political instincts are very bad about this sort of thing. I don't know anything about Canadian realpolitik. But I can say, by the way, that I wouldn't support this initiative even if it were the Conservatives that were putting it forward.
No.
And here's the thing, and this is, I would ask progressives and liberal supporters, if they are comfortable with this, the powers that they're granting the government, that they would, a couple of years from now, those powers are going to be under the auspices of a conservative government. And how do you feel about that? Like, the powers you grant one government, it goes to another government. But the problem with liberals and conservatives too, but mostly liberals, they assume they're going to be in power forever, because all that stuff about natural governing party, they believe that stuff. And that's a problem, because, I don't trust the conservatives as much as the liberals, and I don't trust any government with this kind of power.
No, me neither. I don't either.
Well put, John.
Jon Kay, editor of Quilette, at Jon Kay on Twitter. Really appreciate you spending some time with us today. It is always awesome to have you on the show. You raised the tide, if you will.
I don't know about that, but thank you. It was fun.
No, you do. You do. It's awesome.
It was fun.
It's great having you on.
Is that a Jewish joke? Was that a Jewish joke?
No.
That's what it sounded like.
No, not at all.
Jew? Did you Jew? Yeah.
Straight up white guy to white guy comment. That's all that was. That's one white guy saying to another white guy things. That's all that was. So if you want to get mad at me for saying white guy,
I think it was a parting the sea joke at all. No, I don't think it had anything to do with it.
No, it definitely wasn't. But Jon Kay, he's such a great follow on Twitter. Follow him on Twitter at James D. Fiore as well. Blackballmedia.ca. He's got his first podcast coming up this week. Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, Thursday.
Is that the lead? Thursday.
With Husky,
Blackballed.
taught me Blackballed with James.
Yeah.
And he embarrassed me today. I didn't know that Eastern Standard Time and Eastern Daylight Time were different, schooling me. So. Yeah, I'm going to Charlie Rose this interview and not get into a conversation and just feed him really amazing questions and then not follow up.
Yeah.
That's a strong strategy, James.
I like it. Yeah.
Larry King.
Work that angle.
I think we got Glenn Greenwald on the program tomorrow too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. just like Randy Hillier.
Tomorrow.
Anyway, we've
Yeah.
got Glenn Greenwald
That
on the
should
program
be fun.
tomorrow, which will be a lot of fun.
I mean,
He's
my
the
first
guy that,
question to Glenn is going to be, are you
Snowden.
because he doesn't wear
Why?
pants in interviews, sung pants.
Oh, he doesn't? Oh,
He doesn't wear pants in interviews because he's only be seen from the up. That's what I just feel like asking him that. I don't know. Break the ice.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for the interview nonetheless. Lachlan Cross, 95.7 Cruise FM, at Lachlan Cross on Twitter as well.
Good to see you again, John.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. That was fun.
Yeah, that's
Thanks,
always,
guys.
Always fun. Enjoy
Bye,
you.
guys.
I didn't make any Steppenwolf jokes today either. I would just like to point that out.
Talk soon. Bye, guys.
All right, there you go.
All right.
Jon Kay, Lachlan Cross, and my friend James D. Fiore as well, all on the program today. Great to see everybody. Good to cover a couple of serious subjects, like this Bill C-10, which is a fucking joke. Just an enormous fucking joke. It's and they charge the village idiot, Stephen Guilbeault, with pushing this through. At least if you're going to try and fuck over Canadians' ability to actually form an opinion online, send someone who can put a fucking sentence together. Not Stephen Guilbeault. What about this bill? Really? Tell us more. Liberal MP Stephen Guilbeault, Heritage Minister. I climbed the tower. Anyway, heads up. Heads are going to roll. Thanks to our friends at Blue Microphones. Thanks to our friends at Blue. We are a part of the Blue Crew. You can be too. Go to bluemic.com, at Blue Microphones on Twitter. Check out their full allotment of everything that they can do to make you look and sound like you know what you're doing. The Blue Yeti X mic with the preamp. That's what we use. It's got a USB port in the back. So you don't need any preamps, no screwing around with it. You can set the settings. This is on FM compressor now. FM compressor. It's like 20 different settings you can put. If you want to sound like you're far away, close, whatever. It's incredible what you can do. Same with our friends over at Domination, DMNTN.com. We produce all of our content with it. You can do the same thing. It's AI. It's artificial intelligence. It makes you look like you're way smarter than you are. And you can pump out like 73, 74 pieces of content in 5 minutes. DMNTN.com. Try it for free today. Also, hi to our friends at Black Rose Organics. Better medicine at a better price. Right now, when you join Black Rose Organics with your medical membership, it's like $199. You get half price ounces of the greatest medicine you will ever put in your body. It's called garlic sherbet. Check it out. Go to shop.blackroseorganics.com today. Get signed up for your med card right online, right there. Super easy. If you got a med card, port it. They'll take it from you. And they'll grow you great medicine. Black Rose Organics, shop.blackroseorganics.com. And Easy Auto Financial, our friends at Easy Auto Financial are in it to win it for you. If you need a vehicle and you have nowhere to go because you can't get financing, that is what they do. They get you your financing, and they also find you a car, and all you have to do is go to easyautofinancial.ca. Don't worry about your credit rating. Don't worry about anything else. easyautofinancial.ca. Go check them out today. Sign up for a newsletter at DeanBlundell.com. We'll be back with Glenn Greenwald tomorrow and Nick Kyprios. We'll talk a little playoff hockey because the Leafs are in it to win it, going at it against Montreal tonight. Could be a first-round matchup. And I got to piss, so I'm leaving. But thank you for stopping by. If you joined us, even for 5 minutes, really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for being on the program, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Not Woods.
Oh shit. I think we need to hear that again. I loved it so much. Everybody has to laugh quietly. Stay dry.